"Sir, you need to step away from the dock immediately." The cop's hand was already moving toward his belt when I started laughing. Not the nervous kind of laugh, the kind that comes when you realize the universe just handed you the ultimate punchline. See, 30 seconds earlier, Delilah Whitmore had been screaming across the water about how I was trespassing on Lake Reserve property and didn't belong in their community. Her voice carried that perfect pitch of entitled fury that could shatter wine glasses. Now she's watching from her million-dollar deck, arms crossed, waiting for me to get arrested like some common criminal. What she doesn't know, what none of them know, is that I just inherited the deed that controls every drop of water flowing to their entire lakefront development. Because sometimes, when life hands you an HOA president who thinks she owns the lake, well, sometimes you find out you actually own all their water access. What would you do in my shoes? And hey, where are you watching from? Drop your location below, especially if you've got HOA war stories. 3 months ago, I was Rex Thornton, 52-year-old retired electrician living in Denver, staring at life insurance paperwork and wondering what the hell to do next. My wife, Clara, had lost her fight with cancer the year before, and every corner of our house still carried the ghost of her lavender perfume mixed with hospital antiseptic, a combination that could drop me to my knees faster than touching a live wire. The estate auction notice arrived on a Tuesday. Uncle Jasper, my dad's hermit brother, who'd lived on some Montana lake for 40 years, had finally kicked the bucket. We weren't close, but the old coup always remembered my birthday. With a card containing a crisp 20. His estate was going to public auction. Lake Reserve parcel with associated territorial water rights. Minimum bid $150,000. I'd never heard of a lake reserve being privately owned, but Clara always said I should take more risks. With $1,180,000 from her life insurance burning a hole in my savings account, I figured why not make a strategic investment. Mountain property, lakefront access, and whatever those water rights meant sounded like a solid retirement plan. The drive to Pine Lake, Montana, beat the hell out of Denver's smog-choked air. That sharp mountain breeze actually filled your lungs instead of coating them with exhaust fumes and urban despair. The auction was held right on the property, and I'll admit, the place took my breath away. A modest 1960s cabin sat on 3 pristine acres, complete with a weathered cedar dock stretching into water so clear you could count stones 15 feet down. Uncle Jasper had hand-built that dock from selected logs, every joint fitted like fine furniture. Here's the thing nobody mentioned during the auction. Pine Lake Estates surrounded my purchase like a necklace of million-fold homes. 47 luxury houses, each marketed with exclusive lake access as their golden selling point. The real estate brochures probably used pristine and private more than a politician uses transparency. I bought the property for exactly $11,150K, figuring I'd gotten lakefront real estate for the price of a Denver condo. What I didn't realize was that Lake Reserve parcel meant I'd just purchased the heart of their entire development. And those mysterious territorial water rights buried in legal jargon that was about to become the most expensive oversight in HOA history. Enter Delilah Whitmore. She materialized on my property during week 2 like some suburban conquistador. Clipboard in one hand, measuring tape in the other. Designer workout clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, perfectly styled blonde hair, and a smile that could flip from sweet to surgical faster than a breaker trips. "Welcome to Pine Lake Estates," she announced without bothering to knock. "I'm Delilah, HOA president. We need to discuss some compliance issues with your recent purchase." I was replacing rotted dock planks when she arrived, breathing in that honest scent of fresh cedar, while her overpowering perfume competed with the mountain air. She rattled off violations like a court clerk: dock setback requirements, architectural guidelines, community aesthetic standards. The previous owner was difficult about modernizing, she said with fake sympathy that could curdle milk. "But I'm sure you'll be more reasonable about bringing things up to community standards." I wiped sawdust off my hands, the kind of honest dirt that comes from actual work, and looked at her clipboard. Every violation targeted my dock, the dock Uncle Jasper built, the dock that came with my legal purchase, the dock I was improving with my own sweat and money. "Lady, I bought this at a public auction with clear title. Maybe let me figure out what I actually owned before you start telling me what's wrong with it. Her smile went arctic. Mr. Thornton, Pine Lake Estates, is a premier community. Property values here average 1.2 million. We have standards, not rules, not guidelines. Standards like I was contamination requiring management. That was my first hint that Delilah Whitmore had just picked a fight with the wrong electrician. 3 days later, Delilah returned with reinforcements. This time she brought what she called a state environmental inspector, a guy named Dale, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. He carried an official-looking clipboard and wore a polo shirt with some kind of state seal that seemed suspiciously crooked, like it had been ironed on by someone who'd never seen the real thing. Mr. Thornton, Delilah announced with theatrical authority, Dale here needs to examine your lake reserve property for environmental compliance violations. We've had reports of potential ecological damage from your modifications. Dale started poking around my shoreline, like he knew what he was doing, taking photos of perfectly normal dock supports and making notes that probably said things like would touch his water and fish swim here. The whole performance felt rehearsed like bad community theater, where everyone forgot their lines. But something was eating at me about this whole dog and pony show. Dale kept asking questions that had nothing to do with environmental impact. How deep you think this water gets? You planning any major construction projects? Ever notice any unusual wildlife patterns around here? That last question was delivered while he stared intently at a perfectly ordinary mallard duck paddling by as if it might be harboring state secrets. The smell of fresh was stronger than the pine needles decomposing along my waterline. Then I spotted something that made my electrician's instincts start buzzing. Parked right there in my gravel driveway was a Ford F-150 with Dale's fine furniture. We delivered dreams painted on the side in curly script that belonged on a bakery, not a government vehicle. Clara always said I had a nose for spotting fakes. Came from 30 years of identifying bootleg electrical components that could burn your house down. I pulled out my phone and dialed the Montana Department of Environmental Quality while Dale was still measuring my dock with a tape measure that looked suspiciously like it came from the hardware store clearance bin. Hi, this is Rex Thornton on Pine Lake. I've got an environmental inspector here named Dale, and I just wanted to confirm his visit was scheduled. The voice on the other end was friendly but confused. I'm sorry, Mr. Thornton, but we don't have any inspections scheduled for Pine Lake this month, and we don't have an inspector named Dale. Could you describe this person? I put the phone on speaker and repeated the question loud enough for Dale to hear every word. His face went whiter than fresh drywall, and I swear I could smell his panic sweat mixing with the clean mountain air. Dale, I called out sweetly. The real estate office says they've never heard of you. Want to explain that to everyone? Dale dropped his clipboard like it was on fire and literally ran. Not walked quickly, not made excuses, full-on sprinted to his furniture truck and peeled out of my driveway like he was being chased by angry wasps, leaving behind a cloud of dust and gravel. In his panic, he dropped his fake state ID badge, which turned out to be a laminated printout that wouldn't fool a nearsighted mall cop. But Delilah, she doubled down harder than a Vegas gambler on a losing streak. Well, she huffed, adjusting her designer workout jacket, with the kind of righteous indignation that only comes from years of getting away with nonsense. That just proves my point. You're clearly intimidating official personnel with your aggressive behavior. Private community standards supersede state regulations anyway. The woman had balls. I'll give her that. Caught red-handed running a fake inspection scam, and she's trying to flip it like I'm the problem. Lady, your brother-in-law just fled the scene after impersonating a government official. That's a federal crime, not a community standard. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous, and for a moment, I glimpsed the real Delilah underneath all that suburban polish. That lake reserve property should belong to this community, not some outsider who doesn't understand our values. We'll see what the courts have to say about your fraudulent purchase. I remembered something my old foreman used to say about dealing with property disputes. Public auction sales with clear title trump everything. Deed restrictions, HOA, claims, community standards, the whole works. If you buy it legally at auction, it's yours. Period. I'd learned the hard way to always verify any inspector's credentials through official channels after a scammer nearly convinced my Neighbor to pay for emergency electrical upgrades that would have burned his house down. That night, I called a real estate attorney to double-check my purchase. Turns out my deed was solid as bedrock. Not only was the auction completely legal, but the previous owners had retained something called territorial water extraction privileges that nobody had bothered to explain during the sale. The lawyer's exact words: "Mr. Thornton, you didn't just buy lakefront property. You bought something far more valuable than you realize. I'd strongly suggest you research exactly what those territorial water rights mean." Standing on my dock that evening, listening to the gentle slap of water against cedar posts, and breathing in that clean mountain air mixed with the distant aroma of someone's barbecue, I started to understand that Uncle Jasper hadn't just left me a cabin and some land. He'd left me ammunition for a war I didn't even know was coming. The certified letter arrived 2 days after the fake inspector incident. Thick and official-looking with urgent legal notice stamped in red across the envelope. The smell of fresh ink and legal intimidation filled my kitchen as I tore it open. Emergency HOA meeting. Protecting community water access. The headline screamed. Delilah was organizing what she called an emergency session to discuss threats to our exclusive lake privileges and legal action against fraudulent property claims. The meeting agenda was a masterpiece of manipulation. She planned to convince all 47 homeowners to pull money for a lawsuit, forcing me to sell my lake reserve back to the community. Her letter claimed my purchase was legally questionable and threatened everyone's property values and water rights. Water rights. There was that phrase again. I was still puzzling over the letter when a beat-up Chevy truck pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a guy about 38, wearing work boots and carrying surveying equipment with the easy confidence of someone who actually knew his trade. "You must be Rex," he called out. "I'm Garrett Flynn, local surveyor and part-time fishing guide. Heard Delilah's declaring war on your water access. News travels fast around here." "Small community," Garrett said, walking over with his hand extended. "Plus, I got one of those same legal threat letters. I'm the only other non-HOA resident with independent lake access, live in that converted boathouse downstream. Delilah's been trying to run me off for 3 years." The bacon smell drifting from the expensive houses made my stomach growl, reminding me I'd been living on coffee and whatever canned goods Uncle Jasper had left behind. What's her deal with us regular folks? Control and money. She makes fortunes selling exclusive lake access to rich people, having us commoners around ruins her luxury narrative. Garrett studied my property with professional interest. "But Rex, I got to ask, your deed mentions territorial water extraction privileges. You research what that actually means?" "Honestly, legal paperwork might as well be hieroglyphics." Garrett's eyes lit up. "Mind if I take a look? I specialize in historical property research, and something about Delilah's panic over your water rights doesn't add up." 20 minutes later, we were spread across my kitchen table with deed paperwork, survey maps, and Garrett's laptop displaying Montana territorial statutes. The cabin filled with the musty smell of old documents and fresh possibilities. "Holy hell," Garrett whispered, then caught himself. "Sorry, but Rex, you need to understand what you actually bought here. A headache and a lawsuit. You bought control of the entire lake water system." He pointed at faded blue lines on an 1887 survey map. "These markings show underground springs feeding Pine Lake. Every drop of water in this lake flows from sources on your property." My coffee cup nearly slipped from suddenly numb fingers. "Come again?" "Territorial water extraction privileges from 1887, Garrett explained, pulling up legal statutes on his screen. "Montana territorial law gives you authority over underground water sources. Pine Lake Estates was built in the 1990s, but check this out." He scrolled through county records. The developers never secured water rights before construction. I stared at the survey map, where thin blue lines traced from my springs to the entire lake system. My brain was struggling to process the implications. "Every one of those million-dollar homes," Garrett continued, "gets their exclusive lake access from water flowing through your land. Legally, you control their entire supply." That's when Delilah's real panic made sense. She wasn't just worried about my dock or property values. She was terrified because I'd accidentally bought the foundation of her entire business model. The original developers assumed lake water was public, Garrett said. But territorial rights trump everything. Zoning, HOA, rules, modern permits. I learned this the hard way when researching historical mining claims. Western territorial. Governments granted water rights in perpetuity and they transfer automatically with property deeds. Most people never bother checking what historical rights come with old properties. Just then my phone rang. Delilah's voice was shrill with barely controlled hysteria. Mr. Thornton, I'm calling to offer a generous settlement. The community is prepared to purchase your property for $200,000, $50,000 above what you paid. This would solve everyone's problems. I looked at Garrett, who was grinning and shaking his head. Delilah, I appreciate the offer, but I think I'll hold on to my investment for now. You don't understand the legal complexities involved, she snapped. That property should never have been sold separately from community water access. Maybe you should have thought about that before your fake inspector tried to intimidate me off my own land. The line went dead. Garrett was practically bouncing with excitement. Rex, she just confirmed everything. Delilah knows exactly what you own and she's scared shitless about it. Delilah's next move came under cover of darkness, and it was personal. I woke up Monday morning to find my dock rope lines cut clean through the severed ends floating in the water like dead snakes. Tuesday brought loosened support posts that creaked ominously when I stepped on them. Wednesday, someone had spray painted Trespasser across the cedar planks and sloppy red letters that smelled like cheap hardware store paint. The message was clear. Get out or things get worse. Professional job, Garrett observed, examining the damage Thursday morning. The scent of cut rope and wood stain filled the air, mixing with his strong black coffee that could probably dissolve paint. Whoever's doing this knows exactly how to make a dock unsafe, without making it collapse completely. Trying to force me off the water without creating evidence of serious vandalism. Smart money says yes, but also stupid money because we're going to catch them red-handed. Garrett arrived that afternoon with equipment that looked like it belonged on a nature documentary. Professional trail cameras with infrared capability, motion sensors, and audio recording that could pick up a whispered conversation from 50 yards away. Time to turn your property into Fort Knox, he announced, unpacking waterproof housings and wireless transmitters. These babies will catch a mouse scratching its ass at midnight. We spent the day positioning cameras in hidden locations around my dock and the access paths, disguising them in fake tree bark and weatherproof cases. The work was oddly satisfying, like setting a trap for something that had been stealing from your chicken coop. That night, I got my first reel. Look at Pine Lake's after dark entertainment. The cameras captured everything in crystal clear detail. A figure in dark clothing moving across my property at 2:30 a.m. with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Wire cutters, spray paint, and what looked like a small crowbar. A complete vandalism toolkit. But the real jackpot was when the figure's phone rang. Yeah, Mom. I'm almost done with the dock. No, nobody's around the red. Paint like you wanted. What do you mean send a stronger message? $2,000? You promised me $2,000 for this security work? Bradley Whitmore, Delilah's 19-year-old son, clear as day on both video and audio, taking orders from Mommy Dearest while destroying my property with stolen HOA money. The next morning, I found Bradley at Pine Lake's only coffee shop, nervously fidgeting with his phone and surrounded by the smell of burnt espresso and teenage anxiety. His hands shook slightly when I slid into the booth across from him, and his acne-scarred face flushed red under the harsh fluorescent lights. Morning, Bradley. Rough night. I don't know what you mean, he mumbled, not making eye contact. I pulled out my phone and played 10 seconds of audio from the previous evening. Bradley's own voice filled the small coffee shop. Yeah, Mom, I'm almost done with the dock. The kid's composure shattered like thin ice under a boot. Oh, here's what I know, I said quietly, keeping my voice conversational while morning regulars chatted around us. Your mom's been paying you to vandalize my property using money stolen from the HOA emergency fund. That's not just vandalism. That's felony embezzlement. Bradley started hyperventilating. She said it was security work. She said, you were dangerous and threatening the community. I didn't know it was stealing. The floodgates opened and Bradley revealed something I hadn't expected. This wasn't Delilah's first rodeo. She'd run identical harassment campaigns against 3 other homeowners who'd challenged her authority over the past 5 years. Each family received escalating violations, mysterious property damage, and social isolation until they sold their homes below market value just to escape. The kicker: Delilah's real estate company had handled every one of those distress sales, earning her fat commissions while eliminating opposition to her reign of terror. She calls it community improvement, Bradley whispered, tears mixing with the steam from his untouched coffee. Says, some people just don't fit the Pine Lake lifestyle and need encouragement to find somewhere more suitable. I'd learned about HOA fund misuse during my electrician days when a contractor tried to overcharge a community I was wiring. Using association money for personal vendettas was criminal embezzlement, pure and simple. Every HOA member had the legal right to demand detailed audits and documentation of expenditures, especially when emergency funds mysteriously disappeared. Bradley, your mother's been running a protection racket disguised as community management, and you just handed me everything I need to prove it. The kid broke down completely, sobbing into his hands while the morning coffee crowd pretended not to notice. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered the taste of anger mixed with paint fumes when I'd seen trespassers sprayed across Uncle Jasper's handball dock. That afternoon, I met with Garrett to plan our strategy. We had ironclad evidence of vandalism, embezzlement, and systematic harassment. But most importantly, we had those territorial water rights sitting in my back pocket like a nuclear option. Delilah Whitmore was about to learn what happened when you picked a fight with someone who owned the water you were floating on. That weekend, I finally decided to tackle Uncle Jasper's basement. I'd been avoiding it partly because the place, rare of 40 years of pipe tobacco and something that might have been ancient fishboat, but mostly because rifling through a dead man's obsessions felt like grave robbing. The basement was a monument to obsessive record-keeping. Metal filing cabinets lined one wall, each drawer labeled in Jasper's meticulous handwriting, property surveys, 1980 to 2010, water rights documentation, legal correspondence, and, ominously, HOA disputes 1995 to 2015. And my hands were actually trembling when I opened the water rights cabinet. Survey reports dating back to 1887. Legal correspondence with territorial land offices, court documents from disputes that had apparently raged for decades, and maps. Dozens of incredibly detailed maps showing underground water systems that look like the nervous system of some massive subterranean beast. But the document that stopped my heart was a carbon copy of a letter from 1994, written in Uncle Jasper's careful script. Margaret, those developers never filed for territorial water rights before building. My 1887 grant still controls every spring feeding Pine Lake. Don't mind sharing. Always believe neighbors should help neighbors, but someone ought to know what the law says before trouble comes calling. The lake's been good to me. Figure I can be good to it, Jasper. The musty smell of old paper mixed with my own cold sweat as the implications hit me like a sledgehammer. I found Margaret Sawyer's business card paperclipped to the letter and dialed with shaking fingers, praying she was still alive after 30 years. Chun, surveying, answered a voice weathered by decades of Montana property wars. Miss Sawyer, this is Rex Thornton. I inherited Jasper Thornton's place on Pine Lake. A sharp intake of breath. Jesus Christ. Jasper finally passed. That magnificent bastard outlived half the county. Her voice turned serious. What can I do for you, son? I need to understand what I actually inherited. Rex, you inherited absolute power over Pine Lake. Jasper controlled every underground spring, every water source, every drop that feeds that entire lake system. Those million-dollar houses built without water rights. But Jasper was too decent to crush them. The basement walls seemed to close in as the full weight of this revelation settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. What does that mean in practical terms? It means you own their water. All of it. Montana territorial law gives you complete authority over extraction, distribution, access, everything. You could shut off their entire water supply tomorrow, and it would be perfectly legal. I spread Uncle Jasper's survey maps across his workbench, my fingers tracing the intricate blue lines connecting my modest property to every expensive house. surrounding the lake. The sound of my own heartbeat seemed to echo in the cramped space. Margaret, what would this be worth if I actually enforced these rights? Conservatively, 47 homes using your water illegally for 30 years. We're talking 3 to 4 million in unpaid usage fees. Current private water access rates run 800 to $1,000 per home monthly. The numbers hit me like electrical current, painful and illuminating simultaneously. Uncle Jasper had lived here for 4 decades, watching developers build a luxury community on water they'd never owned, watching real estate agents sell exclusive lake access that was legally his to control. He could have destroyed them all with a single lawsuit. Instead, he'd chosen generosity over greed, community over conflict. But Delilah Whitmore had just picked a fight with the wrong neighbor's nephew. Standing in that tobacco-scented basement, surrounded by 40 years of documented restraint, I realized this wasn't about my dock anymore. I was holding the nuclear codes to Pine Lake's entire existence. The only question was whether I had the backbone to use them. Monday morning, I walked into Maya Blackstone's law office, carrying Uncle Jasper's water rights documentation like I was handling plutonium. The place smelled like leather-bound law books and the kind of expensive coffee that costs more per cup than most people spend on lunch. Mr. Thornton, Maya said after reviewing my documents for 20 minutes, her reading glasses perched on a nose that had obviously broken a few legal precedents. In 30 years of water law practice, I've never seen territorial rights this comprehensive. You don't just own lake access. You control the entire hydrological foundation of their community. Maya was the kind of lawyer who could explain quantum physics to a golden retriever, probably because she'd grown up on a cattle ranch before law school taught her to weaponize words. Her steel gray hair was pulled back in a bun that meant business, and her handshake could crack granite. What are my realistic options here? Option 1, nuclear. Demand immediate payment of $3.4 million in back usage fees plus compounded interest. Legally airtight, financially apocalyptic for them. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. That seems like overkill. Option 2, generous dictator. Waive past fees. Implement reasonable monthly rates. Establish community conservation fund. You look magnanimous while maintaining control. And option 3, Maya's smile could have lit up the county courthouse. Psychological warfare. Offer them a choice between cooperation and complete water shut-off. Sometimes the threat of nuclear war prevents actual nuclear war, especially when you hold all the uranium. That afternoon, we assembled what Maya called the Dream Team. Her partners specialized in environmental law and territorial statutes. A hydraulic engineer confirmed my complete control over Pine Lake's water system. A private investigator documented Delilah's fraud pattern across 3 states. Even a media consultant joined us to prepare for inevitable public attention. The beauty of your position, Maya explained while organizing legal briefs that smelled like fresh ink and impending justice, is that every hostile move Delilah made actually strengthened your case. Harassment, vandalism, embezzlement. She's been digging her own grave with a sterling silver shovel. But Maya's real genius was strategic. Patience. We're going to let her hang herself completely before we act. Tomorrow, we file formal water rights notices with the county. Every homeowner gets certified mail demanding $847 monthly for water access, effective immediately. I remembered something my electrical mentor taught me about troubleshooting dangerous systems. Always give people multiple ways to solve the problem before you cut the power completely. Pride makes folks do stupid things, but offering dignity alongside consequences usually gets better cooperation than just crushing them. They'll panic, Maya continued, clearly enjoying this chess game. Emergency HOA meetings, lawyers, threatening frivolous lawsuits, probably attempts to bribe local officials. That's when we reveal our generous alternative, which is complete amnesty for past usage, sliding scale fees based on property values, and establishment of the Clara Thornton Memorial Conservation Fund using water rights income. You transform from potential destroyer to reluctant community savior. That evening, Garrett brought 3 sympathetic neighbors to a secret meeting in my kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with nervous energy. As we discussed what Maya called community coalition building. Delilah's terrorized this neighborhood for years, whispered Janet Morrison, whose waterfront cottage had been targeted with similar harassment campaigns. But nobody dared speak up because she controls the HOA budget and has connections with local contractors. She tried to force us out 2 years ago, added Tom Brennan, an older gentleman whose hands shook slightly from what looked like Parkinson's. Claimed our fishing boat violated aesthetic standards and threatened daily fines until we removed it. These weren't just